we have to actually identify who we want to be as a man. Like, what does that look like for us? Once we get to that point of being objective, we have to start actually picking the traits and ideas around the authenticity of a man that we intentionally want to become. We need to identify what we're trying to achieve as a man today. All right, everyone, welcome back to the Art of Masculinity. So you guys know, or maybe you don't. There's a book that I have that's recently been written by myself, and it's called Design the Man Within. And if you haven't purchased it, I highly recommend it. But on the same token, I want to talk a little bit about what this even means, right? So like a lot of people, I can already hear like the people that I've designed the man that I am within. Yeah. Okay. Sure. You have. Really? I don't think so, because most of you guys that believe that or want to say that, have actually never taken time to look at yourself internally and look at the foundational pieces of who you are as a man. And then on top of that, have the conversation of what you enjoy and what you don't enjoy, what's aligned, what's not aligned, and then go ahead and curate a new version of that man, because we all evolve. And so that's the other piece to this. You got to recognize that you evolve in your thought processes and your ideas and your perceptions and all of that through the experiences that we have. So majority of people, to say the least, have not actually sat down and designed intentionally who they are within. And it's an evolutionary piece to who we are as individuals and as adults. I mean, our brains are so complex. If you dive into anything on Carl Jung about this, while I totally support, a lot of the things that he's come up with, he's not the end all be all. I will say that. And he's got a lot of flaws in some of his work as well. But some of the foundational pieces that he's developed on the psyche were more advanced than Freud's. And that's why people recognize him as being so influential when it comes to the psyche in general, but also into masculinity. So anyways, the point of that is that majority of us, without the intention of actually looking at ourselves and having the forethought to say that there's an evaluation here that we are making of who we are and how we show up. And then not only are we taking that evaluation, we're removing pieces and implementing new pieces to help us to evolve and optimize how we operate in this world. This has to come from the humility of understanding that everything you know right up into this point may not actually be correct, or everything that you've based your life on may not actually be what is good for you in this time or moving forward. So as we look at that, it's to say, how do we even, like, what does it even mean to design the man within? And then how do we even do this? Okay. So the first thing is, what does it even mean? Well, what it means is that we actually take introspection as to who we are and the way we see ourselves in this world, the way that we see a positive man in this world, the way that we want to influence the next generation, the way that we want to influence our individual families and tribes. Like, it's taking a look at that holistic picture and saying, okay, what does that look like for me? And am I serving that purpose right now in the most positive way, where it's giving other people an advantage as well in their lives? And majority of the time, especially because our circles evolve, because of our perceptions evolving, and because of in general, just our environments evolving, we have to kind of take a look at this on a more regular basis than what people believe. Like, I'm giving you guys the tools right now to say, hey, how do we design this man within today, right? Like, I'm giving you the tools. Maybe you've never done this in your entire life and you're like, oh, wow, this is great. Like but it's giving you the tools to actually do this on a more regular basis, to say that, hey man, like, where are the places that I'm still consistent and I still believe are good things, and where are some of the things that may have been that may need to be pushed out because the season or environment has changed, right? And that is really what we're doing. So what does it mean to do that? It's to constantly become introspective and evaluate the traits and perceptions that we have on this world as far as who we are as the men that show up in it. Okay. And so to even get to that point of curating who he is, we have to understand that we are in a certain space right now with certain beliefs and certain traits that were built around certain foundations that we may or may not have developed ourselves. And predominantly, most of you were given those traits, those foundational pieces. Okay. So that is really what it means to be introspective and to be objective of that introspection. Because if we become subjective, we can also become offended by our internally by ourselves. Might sound really weird, but we can become offended at the questions we even ask ourselves, which then means that we're not going to look at these areas of growth or adaptability or evolution. We're just going to look at them as challenging because the fact that we're so obstinate in the way that we view the world right there and then, and how we view ourselves, that there's no mode of moving forward. There's no method of moving forward because we can't come to the terms that maybe what the way we are is not serving us in the way that we desire it to serve us. So that has to be an objective view, which is very difficult. And I will acknowledge that it was one of the most difficult things I went through in my own process of really designing my own man within. And in all of that, though, is a shit ton of growth. So don't be fearful of being objective. And if you start to be offended because of that objectivity, dive into that, it may not be necessarily a shadow, but dive into that insecurity, right? And figure out where it's coming from and why it's showing up. And then that'll bring you back to the exploration of objectivity. So that's the first piece. Now, have you actually intentionally done this? Take a look at yourself and just be honest. Like, have you sat down and said, wow, here's what I believe as a man today? And maybe some of these things don't necessarily fit with the man that I want to be moving forward. Or maybe some of these things don't necessarily present an effective, positive man today in the world in the way that society has evolved. Therefore, I want to be adaptable, switch that, and then change to something that actually can optimize the environment to show the best version of who I am. Right? It's like there's this conversation that's being neglected because people are like, well, you shouldn't have to change with society. Well, yeah, you'd think that, right? But it's not that way, because as society evolves, we as human beings have to evolve or we're just going to be left behind. It's been the pedigree of why you're even here today as a multi-celled organism. So really taking a look and saying, have I intentionally sat down and reviewed these pieces of who I am as a man? And have I actually sat down, questioned them, and then potentially implemented something new? So, and the next piece to that, the next question is, have I consciously put anything into place? So if you said, yes, I've sat down and evaluated these things, I figured out that because early on, I wasn't aligned with some of the things that I was given as a young boy. And so I didn't really believe those to be value as a man, as authentic to me as a man, inherently, like soulfully, energetically as a man. So I started to say those pieces weren't super important. But then have you implemented anything else? Right? So to consciously design a man internally to us, you have to actually start to implement new pieces. You can't just flag pieces that are inconsistent with how you want to show up in this world. That's simply the first step. The second step to that is actually saying, okay, now what is it that I can implement that influences the new pieces in which I desire to be this strong man in this world? And that looks different for everybody, because obviously the pieces that we're removing and implementing are always different amongst men because of our environments changing. And we're kind of in pockets of, if we consider this, pockets of tribes. And in those tribes, there's different values for what it means to be a strong man. So there could have been different values handed to you right off the bat that you're just not aligned with and you want to change. So in all of that, just make sure that you're looking at this and saying, okay, not only am I evaluating what is there, I'm not only evaluating kind of where I've come from and being objective about it, but what am I actually putting into place to design, to intentionally curate, design this man that I desire to bring to the world? And a lot of times you may not have the tools. And that's okay. So don't feel inferior if you don't have the tools, or don't feel lost if you don't have the tools. They're out there and obtainable. It's just once we find the position that we're trying to change, or the traits that we're trying to change, now we have a direction to go find these tools. So then we can actually perform this implementation process. And that can come from anything from podcasts, that can come from coaches, that can come from books, that can come from all the above, mentors, all that. So take a look at an avenue in which you're trying to improve and see where you can get the tools from, so you can start the implementation process. And in that, now you start to have one foot in front of the other, right? Like, don't look at the big insurmountable goal that isn't achievable at this time, because you're way down at step A and that's all the way at step, F. So look at the one step forward every time. And that's important. So when you're doing this, it's like, okay, how can we consciously put ourselves in a place where we're implementing the tools to now change the perspectives that we feel are not aligned with us? And this means that we also have to do one other step, which is actually kind of backwards. So this would come before the implementation process, is we have to actually identify who we want to be as a man today, as your man today, as the man moving forward in the future with the current environment and how he desires to impact the world. Like, what does that look like for us? So once we get to that point of being objective, we have to start actually picking the traits and ideas around the authenticity of a man that we intentionally want to become. Without that, you have no goals. Without that, you have no end zone. You have nothing to look forward to build towards, right? We don't want to focus on those pieces in the sense of making them unobtainable by looking at all the steps that go into place, like I just mentioned. We don't want to do that, but we need to identify those. We need to identify what we're trying to achieve as a man today. Once we are able to say, hey, this is who I want to become, now I can start to say, okay, where are the pieces that are going to get me there? Or what is the next piece to move me forward in this journey? And where can I obtain that tool? And then how can I implement that tool? Because it's all an effort, guys. Like, if you think that this is going to happen overnight, it's not. And not only that, it's going to be a constant evaluation. So if you're not willing to do the work on yourself, then just by all means, sit where you are. Be the same mediocre, average person that you are, the one that hasn't evolved, the one that's holding back not only himself, but holding back those around him. Go ahead and continue to be him. I say that with love because I was that guy for a long time. So I'm speaking out of experience, but you can go ahead and stay that man, or you can decide that things are going to be different, and you can start to remind yourself that it's going to take constant work, that there are going to be days you don't want to do it, that there are going to be days that challenge your foundations, that there's going to be days that challenge your perspective and your authenticity. And you're going to have to really look at that and evaluate and continually evaluate and put into practice the things that are going to help you as a man to become and design that intentional man that you desire to be. It's not going to happen overnight. You will be challenged. It's always going to be work. Those are three things that will 100% be true on this journey. But if you're willing to do that and change this perspective that you're done with work, that you're done developing, if you're willing to change that, then you have the ability to see a life that is far beyond anybody else around you that isn't willing to do that work, that isn't willing to step forward every day, and isn't willing to put in the time to build those skills. They're just more attached to hopping on Netflix or scrolling Instabook. And, that is their choice, and you don't have to follow that. So just remember that through this all, if you're going to actually design the man within, you have to be willing to say, hey, work needs to be done. I want to be more authentic. And the work isn't going to stop just because I'm successful in this evolution, or at this season of my life, successful in this evolution. Okay. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and make sure if you do want to foot forward with Designing the Man Within, get my book, Design the Man Within. It's at designthemanwithin.com. You can hop over there or hop over to Amazon, grab the book, because it's going to give you the steps. So if you don't want to hire a coach or a mentor, or other programs are too expensive, get the book. Get the book and just do the work. At the end of every chapter, I promise you, you will consciously begin to design this man within in a way that's going to help influence continual evolution as the seasons change, as your perceptions change, as your experiences change. So do yourself a favor, go buy Design the Man Within at designthemanwithin.com. It'll be hugely beneficial to you if this is the journey you want to embark on. All right, everybody. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. And as always, become a better caliber of man, because the world deserves it.